Who could have imagined that a simple $100 accounting error would become the death sentence for my career? They fired me publicly, humiliated me in front of the entire company, and made sure no one in Ohio would hire me again. But what the executives at Falcon Ridge Enterprises didn't know was that buried deep in an old laptop drive, I had accidentally saved files that could bring their entire empire crashing down. This isn't just a story about wrongful termination. It's about how one discarded employee became their worst nightmare. My name is Amanda Doyle, and until 3 months ago, I was just another invisible cog in the massive machine that is Falcon Ridge Enterprises. 34 years old, divorced, drowning in mortgage payments on a house that was supposed to be our forever home. You know the type. The kind of person who arrives 15 minutes early, stays an hour late, and still somehow never gets noticed when promotion season rolls around. I'd been working as a senior accountant at Falcon Ridge's Ohio headquarters for 6 years. The company was one of those logistics giants that nobody outside the industry had heard of, but somehow managed to move half the freight in the Midwest. Glass towers, marble lobbies, the works. The kind of place where executives drove Teslas and Porsches while the rest of us counted our gas money to make it through the week. My desk sat on the 14th floor, tucked between the printer room and the emergency stairs, prime real estate for someone they wanted to forget existed. Every morning, I'd squeeze past the broken water cooler that had been waiting for parts since 2019, boot up my ancient Dell laptop that IT kept promising to replace, and dive into spreadsheets that would make most people's eyes bleed. The divorce had cleaned me out. Kevin got the savings, the good car, and somehow even managed to take the dog. I got the house, along with the mortgage that ate 70% of my paycheck, and a recurring appointment with a therapist I couldn't afford. But I kept showing up, kept pushing through, because that's what you do. You survive. My days blurred together in a haze of purchase orders, vendor invoices, and budget reconciliations. I'd eat lunch at my desk, usually whatever sad salad I'd thrown together at 11:30 the night before. The other accountants, mostly men, mostly younger, would head out for beers and wings, never quite remembering to invite me. Not that I could afford it anyway. The gender dynamics at Falcon Ridge were like something out of the 1960s dressed up in modern HR policies. Sure, we had diversity training twice a year. And yes, there were women in leadership, all 2 of them, both in soft departments like HR and corporate communications. In finance, it was a boys' club through and through. They'd talk about golf games I wasn't invited to, reference conversations from the urinals, and somehow always forget to CC me on important emails until it was too late to contribute. I'd watch guys who started years after me leapfrog into management positions. Brad really showed initiative on that Peterson account, they'd say, even though I'd done all the actual work while Brad took credit in meetings I wasn't important enough to attend. Or, Mike's got that killer instinct we need in leadership, which apparently meant he was good at interrupting women in meetings and taking their ideas. But I kept my head down, did my work, and told myself that eventually, merit would win out. That's the American dream, right? Work hard, pay your dues, and someday you'll get your shot. I even started taking online MBA classes, bleeding another $400 a month I didn't have into a degree that might finally make them see me as management material. The truth was, I needed this job. The mortgage wasn't going to pay itself. And at 34, starting over felt impossible. My industry connections were limited. My resume was solid but unremarkable. And Ohio wasn't exactly drowning in corporate accounting positions. So I smiled at the condescension, laughed at the barely veiled sexist jokes, and quietly fixed the mistakes my male colleagues made before the higher-ups could notice. I became an expert at being invisible and indispensable at the same time. The kind of employee who never caused problems, never pushed too hard, never asked for too much. Just reliable Amanda, always there to clean up the mess, never making waves. Looking back now, I realize that's exactly what they counted on. My invisibility, my desperation, my need to keep that paycheck coming no matter what indignities they piled on. They thought they had me figured out, another middle-aged divorced woman who'd take whatever they dished out because she had no other options. They were wrong. It started on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were vendor payment days, and that I was rushing through a stack of invoices before the 3 p.m. cutoff. The coffee maker was broken again. I'd been up until 2 a.m. finishing my MBA assignment, and my eyes were practically crossing from staring at numbers all morning. The invoice was from Clearwater Supplies, routine office equipment, nothing unusual. $1,147.50 for printer cartridges and paper. I entered it into the system, authorized the payment, and moved on. Except somewhere between my exhausted brain and my fumbling fingers, I typed $1,947.50 instead. $100. A rounding error in a company that moved millions daily. I didn't even notice until Friday afternoon when Brad, of course it was Brad, came strutting over to my desk with a printout and that smirk he probably practiced in the mirror. "Amanda, we need to talk about your Clearwater payment," he said, loud enough for half the floor to hear. "Looks like you overpaid by $100. That's concerning." My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. "I'll contact them immediately and request a credit for next month's invoice. It's a simple fix." Simple? Brad's eyebrows shot up theatrically. "This is a financial control failure. We're talking about company funds here." Company funds. $100 to a company that spent more than that on executive lunch meetings. But I apologized, filled out the correction paperwork, and thought that would be the end of it. Monday morning. I knew something was wrong the moment I badged in. The security guard gave me a look, that mixture of pity and discomfort that meant he knew something I didn't. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. When I reached my floor, conversations stopped mid-sentence as I walked by. My computer wouldn't accept my login. "Amanda?" It was Jennifer from HR, standing behind me with that practiced sympathetic expression they must teach in HR school. "Could you come with me, please? Bring your personal items." The walk to the conference room was a blur. I remember grabbing my coffee mug, the one my daughter had made me in pottery class, and my phone charger. That was it. 6 years, and everything that mattered fit in my hands. Richard Steinberg, the CFO, was waiting in the conference room with Jennifer and someone from legal I'd never seen before. The table had a single sheet of paper on it, my termination letter. "Amanda," Richard began, not even bothering to sit down. "The Clearwater incident has raised serious concerns about your attention to detail and professional judgment. In reviewing your work, we've found a pattern of carelessness that puts our financial controls at risk." "What pattern?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. "I've had excellent reviews for 6 years. $100 error." "It's not about the amount," he interrupted. "It's about trust. How can we trust someone who makes such careless mistakes with our financial systems? What else might you have missed? What other errors are waiting to be discovered?" The legal representative slid another paper across the table. "We're prepared to offer 2 weeks severance, contingent on signing this separation agreement and NDA. 2 weeks, after 6 years of 60-hour weeks, missed birthdays, and saving their asses more times than I could count. 2 weeks. And if I don't sign?" Richard's expression hardened. "Then you leave with nothing, and will be forced to note in your employment record that you were terminated for cause due to financial mismanagement. Good luck explaining that to future employers." They had me cornered, and they knew it. No severance meant no mortgage payment. A termination for cause meant no unemployment benefits. And that employment record would follow me everywhere. I signed. But the humiliation wasn't over. An hour later, as I was being escorted out by security, actually escorted like a criminal, an email went out to the entire company. I know because Jennifer accidentally had her phone facing me as we walked, the screen showing the message. "Team, effective, immediately. Amanda Doyle is no longer with Falcon Ridge Enterprises. This separation is due to serious breaches in financial protocols that compromised our fiscal responsibility standards. We take such matters extremely seriously and want to assure all stakeholders that we maintain the highest standards of financial integrity." They didn't just fire me, they destroyed me, made me radioactive, turned a $100 error into a scarlet letter that would follow me through every background check, every reference call, every attempt to rebuild my career. As security watched me load my pathetic box of belongings into my 12-year-old Honda, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just anger or humiliation. It was the cold realization that this wasn't really about $100. This was deliberate, calculated. The question was, why? The first week, I was in denial. I updated my resume, reached out to recruiters, and told myself this was an opportunity for something better. By week 2, reality started setting in. Every phone screening that started promisingly ended the same way. So, Amanda, can you explain why you left Falcon Ridge? I'd give my practiced answer about seeking new challenges, but they always pressed further. We'll need to contact your previous employer for a reference. The callbacks stopped coming. By week 3, I was desperate enough to call Sandra, a former colleague who'd moved to a competing firm. We'd grabbed coffee occasionally, and I thought maybe she could help. Amanda, I'm so sorry, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper even though we were on the phone. I actually mentioned your name to our hiring manager. He made some calls, and look, I don't know what Falcon Ridge is telling people, but he said you were unhireable. That's the exact word he used. But it was a $100 error, Sandra. You know my work. I know. But they're saying it wasn't just that. Something about a pattern of financial irregularities, potential fraud investigation pending. It's bullshit. But nobody wants to take the risk. Fraud investigation? They were implying I was under investigation for fraud? I spent that night going through my bank statements, calculating how long I could survive. The mortgage was $2,400 a month. Utilities, food, gas, MBA loan payments. I was burning through $4,200 monthly minimum. My savings would last maybe 2 months. The 2-week severance was already gone. I expanded my job search radius. Cincinnati, Cleveland, even looked at remote positions. But Falcon Ridge's poison had spread. One recruiter, after a few drinks at a networking event, told me straight, someone at Falcon Ridge really wants you blacklisted. This isn't just a bad reference, they're actively sabotaging you. The house was the next to go. I called the bank, tried to negotiate a payment plan, but without employment verification, they wouldn't budge. I listed it for sale, praying it would sell before foreclosure proceedings started. My American dream reduced to a motivated seller listing on Zillow. I moved in with my sister in Columbus, sleeping on her couch, trying to be invisible in her life like I'd been at Falcon Ridge. But at night, I'd lie awake wondering why. Why had they gone nuclear over such a minor mistake? What was I missing? It was during one of those sleepless nights that I remembered my old laptop. When Falcon Ridge finally upgraded my ancient Dell 6 months ago, I'd been in the middle of quarter-end close. I'd copied everything to my personal laptop to work from home that weekend, then never deleted it. It was sitting in a box in my sister's garage with the rest of my stuff. At 3 a.m., I dug it out and powered it on. The Falcon Ridge files were still there, nested in a folder called Q2 Backup. I started scrolling through them, not sure what I was looking for. Vendor contracts, payment schedules, budget reports, all routine stuff I'd seen 1,000 times. Then I found a folder I didn't recognize. Project Clearstone. My heart stopped. Clearstone, Clearwater, similar names, easy to confuse. I opened it. Inside were emails, spreadsheets, and PDF scans of contracts. But these weren't the contracts I'd processed. These showed Falcon Ridge paying Clearstone Logistics, a company I'd never heard of, millions of dollars for consulting services and route optimization. Oh, the amounts were staggering. $2.3 million here. $4.7 million there. All authorized by Richard Steinberg himself. I cross-referenced the payments with our actual shipping data. During the months of highest payments to Clearstone, our shipping costs had actually increased. Whatever optimization they were providing, it wasn't working. Or maybe it was never meant to. I Googled Clearstone Logistics. Their website was generic corporate nonsense. Stock photos of trucks and warehouses, vague promises of synergistic solutions. But the business registration told a different story. Clearstone was incorporated in Delaware, of course, with its mailing address listed as a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands. The CEO's name made my blood run cold. Robert Steinberg, Richard's brother. I kept digging. Bank records I'd somehow captured showed Clearstone's payments flowing out to dozens of other shell companies, then circling back to unnamed accounts in Cyprus and Switzerland. This wasn't just embezzlement. It was a full-scale money laundering operation, using Falcon Ridge's legitimate logistics business to wash dirty money. And then I found the email that explained everything. It was from Richard to legal, dated the day before my error. A. Doyle processed vendor payment for Clearwater Supplies, similar name to Project C, could be a problem if anyone looks closer. Need immediate solution. Make it about performance, not the payment. Destroy credibility preemptively. They fired me because I'd accidentally stumbled near their secret. The Clearwater payment had triggered their panic. What if I noticed the similarity to Clearstone? What if I started asking questions? Better to destroy me first, make me radioactive, ensure no one would ever believe anything I said. I sat in my sister's dark garage, laptop screen glowing, realizing I was holding evidence of a multi-million-dollar fraud. Evidence that could destroy Richard Steinberg, possibly take down all of Falcon Ridge's leadership. The question was, what was I going to do with it? I spent the next 3 days barely sleeping, going through every file meticulously. The scope was staggering. Clearstone Logistics wasn't just siphoning money, it was part of an intricate web of fraud involving inflated shipping costs, phantom deliveries, and kickbacks from vendors. The total approached $47 million over 3 years. The smoking gun was a spreadsheet hidden in a subfolder marked Archive 2019. It detailed the real shipping costs versus what was reported to shareholders. The discrepancies were hidden through a maze of adjustments and reclassifications that would make your head spin. But I'd been untangling Falcon Ridge's books for 6 years. I could follow the trail. What really made my hands shake was finding my own electronic signature on several of these reports. Not the actual fraudulent contracts, Richard was too smart for that, but on routine summary documents that referenced them. Documents I'd signed without looking too closely because I trusted the source data. They'd made me an unwitting accomplice, given themselves insurance in case things went south. My first instinct was to call the FBI. But then I imagined the conversation. Hi, I'm a disgraced accountant who was fired for financial mismanagement, and I just happened to find evidence of massive fraud on a laptop I shouldn't have. They'd need to verify everything, and the first person they'd call would be Falcon Ridge. Richard would have time to destroy evidence, shift blame, maybe even frame me for the whole thing. I needed to be smarter. I made copies of everything, cloud storage, USB drives, even printed hard copies of the most damaging documents. I opened a new email account and sent encrypted files to myself, creating a digital trail that couldn't be erased. Then I started researching lawyers who specialized in whistleblower cases. The Dodd-Frank Act, I learned, could protect me and even reward me if I reported financial fraud to the SEC. But I needed more than just protection. I needed revenge. I wanted Richard Steinberg to feel what I'd felt. The humiliation, the desperation, the complete destruction of everything he'd built. That's when I thought of Jacob Morrison. Jacob ran IT at Falcon Ridge, and he was one of the few people who'd been genuinely kind to me. We'd bonded over late nights during system upgrades, sharing takeout and complaints about management. He texted me after the firing, saying how fucked up it was. Maybe he'd help. I messaged him on Signal, the encrypted app he'd told me about during one of his rants about corporate surveillance. Coffee? Need advice about tech stuff for job hunting. We met at a diner outside the city, one of those places with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that could strip paint. Jacob looked nervous, constantly checking over his shoulder. Jesus, Amanda, you look like hell, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. Thanks. Getting destroyed by your employer tends to affect your skincare routine. He laughed nervously. Look, I can't stay long. If they knew I was meeting you, they're watching you. They're watching everyone now. Something's got them spooked. Richard's been having me pull server logs, checking who's accessed what files. He even asked me to do a deep scan for any data that might have been copied to external drives. My pulse quickened, but I kept my face neutral. Interesting. Any idea what triggered it? No clue. But it started right after you left. They're paranoid about something. I made a decision. It was risky. But I needed an ally on the inside. Jacob, what if I told you I know exactly what they're looking for? His coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. Amanda. I pulled out my phone and showed him one document, just enough to prove I wasn't bluffing. His face went pale. Holy shit, holy shit. There's more, $47 million more. You need to go to the FBI, now. I will. But first, I want to make sure they can't cover it up. I need someone inside to preserve the evidence. They're probably deleting files as we speak. Jacob was shaking his head before I finished. I can't. I have a kid. Amanda. I can't lose this job. They destroyed me over $100. Jacob, what do you think they'll do when this comes out and they need someone to blame? You think Richard won't throw you under the bus? Our IT director should have caught this. Clear negligence in system oversight. He was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee. What would you need? Access to the current files, confirmation that they haven't been altered, maybe a backup they don't know about. Christ, that's conspiracy. That's federal charges if we're caught. We're already caught, Jacob. We just don't know it yet. The only question is whether we go down as victims or as the ones who exposed them. He stood up, dropped a 20 on the table. I need to think about this. Don't think too long. They're getting ready to run. I can feel it. As he walked away, I wasn't sure if I'd just gained an ally or signed my own death warrant, but I was past the point of playing it safe. They'd taken everything from me, my job, my reputation, my future. Now it was my turn to take everything from them. 3 days passed with no word from Jacob. I'd nearly given up when a signal message appeared at 2 a.m. They're moving files to offshore servers. Massive deletion scheduled for Friday. Whatever you're planning, do it now. Friday was 2 days away. The annual shareholders' meeting was next Thursday. If they completed the deletion, the evidence would be gone forever, and they'd probably disappear to some non-extradition country with their millions. I couldn't wait any longer. That morning, I walked into the offices of Hartley & Associates, a law firm specializing in corporate whistleblower cases. Michelle Hartley herself took my case after reviewing just a sample of what I had. This is extraordinary, she said, her poker face cracking slightly. But we need to move fast. I'll file with the SEC today. But we should also loop in the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Are you prepared for what comes next? What do you mean? Once this goes public, Falcon Ridge will come after you with everything they have. They'll claim you stole proprietary information, that you're a disgruntled employee making false accusations. They'll sue you into oblivion. They already destroyed my life. What's left to lose? She smiled grimly. Good point. But I have an idea that might give us leverage. You said the shareholders' meeting is next week. Thursday. They stream it live for investors. Perfect. We file sealed documents with the SEC now, but we time the unsealing for maximum impact. Can your IT contact help with something more dramatic? That night, Jacob and I met in a parking garage like something out of a spy movie. He was sweating despite the cold. I can't do this, he said immediately. They installed new security cameras. Richard's basically living in the office. He knows something's coming. Jacob, please, just one thing. I need you to give me access to the presentation system for the shareholders' meeting. That's insane. There'll be hundreds of people there. Press, investors. Exactly. He stared at me. You want to expose them live, in front of everyone? They humiliated me publicly, made sure everyone knew I was fired for financial mismanagement. It seems only fair. Amanda, that's not whistleblowing, that's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. He was quiet for a long moment, then pulled out a laptop. The presentation system runs through a cloud server. I can create a hidden admin account, but it'll only work once. The moment you use it, they'll trace it back to me. By then, it won't matter. They'll have bigger problems. He worked for 20 minutes, fingers flying over the keyboard. There. Thursday, 2 p.m. You'll have a 15-minute window when the system does its automated backup. You can override the presentation feed then. Whatever you upload will display on every screen in the conference hall and on the live stream. What about you? What will you do? I've already accepted a job in Seattle. I leave Wednesday night. By the time this goes down, I'll be on a plane. We parted without another word. I spent the next 2 days organizing the evidence into a devastating presentation. Bank records, emails, the fraudulent contracts, each slide more damning than the last. I added audio clips I'd extracted from video conferences that had been accidentally saved to the shared drive. Richard's voice, clear as day. The Clearstone funds need to be washed through 3 more shells before we can touch them. Michelle filed the SEC complaint Wednesday morning, sealed for 48 hours. The FBI was copied in, ready to move once the evidence went public. Everything was in place. Wednesday evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. Amanda Doyle. The voice was unfamiliar, professional. Yes? This is Detective Morrison with Columbus PD. We've received a report that you're in possession of stolen corporate property. We need you to come to the station immediately. My blood went cold. They knew. Somehow, they knew. I'll need to call my lawyer first. That's your right, ma'am. But I should warn you, Falcon Ridge has provided evidence that you downloaded proprietary files worth millions of dollars. They're pushing for immediate arrest on corporate espionage charges. I hung up and called Michelle immediately. Don't go to the police, she said. It's a scare tactic. They're trying to spook you into running or destroying evidence. The SEC filing protects you as a whistleblower. Stay put, don't answer the door, and whatever you do, don't delete anything. I spent that night barricaded in my sister's apartment, jumping at every sound. They were playing chicken, betting I'd crack before Thursday afternoon. But they'd miscalculated. They'd already taken everything from me. I had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Thursday morning came gray and cold. I sat in my sister's living room, laptop open, watching the shareholders' meeting stream begin. Richard Steinberg stood at the podium, immaculate in his $5,000 suit, selling lies to a room full of investors. Falcon Ridge has never been stronger, he declared. Our proprietary logistics optimization has generated record profits. I looked at the clock, 1:58 p.m. My hands hovered over the keyboard. In 2 minutes, Richard Steinberg would learn what it felt like to lose everything in an instant, just like I had. The difference was, he actually deserved it. 2 quiet key, 1 voice p.m. My finger hovered over the enter key as Richard droned on about sustainable growth trajectories and enhanced shareholder value. The irony of him preaching about financial integrity while stealing millions wasn't lost on me. I clicked enter. For a moment, nothing happened. Richard continued his presentation, clicking through his sanitized slides. Then the screen flickered, his PowerPoint disappeared, replaced by a single black slide with white text, "The real Falcon Ridge finances." Richard froze mid-sentence. He clicked his remote frantically, but the slides advanced on their own. The first document appeared, the Clearstone Incorporation Papers, with Robert Steinberg's name highlighted in yellow. Technical difficulties, Richard said, his voice cracking. If we could just... But the audio system had kicked in. His own voice filled the conference hall. The Clearstone funds need to be washed through 3 more shells before we can touch them. The room erupted. Investors jumped to their feet. Phones appeared everywhere, recording everything. Richard was screaming at the tech team, but they couldn't override Jacob's admin access. The slides kept coming, each one a nail in Falcon Ridge's coffin. Bank statements showing the money flowing to the Cayman Islands, emails discussing how to hide the transactions from auditors, the spreadsheet comparing real costs to reported costs, with a $47 million gap circled in red. Then came my addition, a slide showing my employment record, my 6 years of excellent reviews, the $100 error, the termination letter, and finally, the email. A. Doyle processed vendor payment for Clearwater supplies. Similar name to Project C, need immediate solution. The live stream comments exploded. Reporters who'd been half asleep were now shouting questions. Several board members stormed the stage. Richard had gone pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The presentation ended with contact information for the SEC and FBI, along with a simple message. Full documentation has been provided to federal authorities. Investigation pending. I closed my laptop and leaned back. Somewhere across town, FBI agents were probably walking into Falcon Ridge's offices with warrants. Richard Steinberg would be in handcuffs before dinner. My phone buzzed. Michelle Hartley. Jesus Christ, Amanda. That was something? Too much? From a legal standpoint? Probably. From a justice standpoint? That was fucking beautiful. The FBI just called. They're moving in now. They want you to come in tomorrow for a formal statement. What about the corporate espionage charges? What charges? You're a protected whistleblower who just exposed one of the biggest corporate frauds in Ohio history. You're untouchable. Plus, the SEC bounty on a case this big, you're looking at 10 to 15% of recovered funds. I did the math. 10% of 47 million. Also, Michelle continued, my phone hasn't stopped ringing. 3 companies want to interview you for senior positions. Turns out, being the accountant who caught a massive fraud is great for the resume. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet apartment, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Peace, not happiness, exactly. The damage was done, the months of humiliation, the near financial ruin, the systematic destruction of my reputation. That couldn't be undone. But Richard Steinberg was finished. Falcon Ridge would likely collapse. Everyone who'd participated in making my life hell would spend the next several years dealing with federal investigations, legal fees, and criminal charges. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Jacob, on plane to Seattle, saw the stream. That was incredible. They got what they deserved. Take care, Amanda. Another text, this one from Sandra. Holy shit, Amanda, watching the news. Richard arrested. You're a legend. By evening, it was the top story on every business news site. Falcon Ridge Enterprises CFO arrested in $47 million fraud scheme. Whistleblower exposes massive corporate corruption. Live stream disaster. Company fraud revealed during shareholders' meeting. The best headline came from a tech blog. Fired employee destroys entire company with PowerPoint presentation. I ordered Chinese food, the good stuff, not the cheap lunch special I'd been living on. While eating my Kung Pao chicken, I watched the news coverage on my laptop. Security footage of Richard being led out in handcuffs. Investors demanding answers. Employees streaming out of the building carrying boxes. The company already in free fall. Every single person who'd participated in my destruction was named in the indictments. Brad, who'd made such a big deal about the $100, was apparently in on the scheme. The HR director who'd smiled while handing me my termination papers had been taking kickbacks. The entire leadership team was going down. They'd tried to destroy me to protect their secret. Instead, they'd handed me the weapon for their own destruction. The files they never knew I had. The access they forgot to revoke. The rage they never expected from someone they saw as weak and desperate. Tomorrow, I'd go to the FBI and tell them everything. Next week, I'd start interviewing for new positions. Eventually, the SEC would cut me a check that would ensure I'd never be desperate again. But tonight, I sat in my sister's apartment, watching an empire burn, and felt something better than vindication. I felt free. The FBI interview lasted 6 hours. 2 agents, Thompson and Reed, walked me through every document, every email, every transaction. They'd already frozen Falcon Ridge's accounts and seized their servers. What they found went even deeper than my files showed. Ms. Doyle, Agent Thompson said, sliding a photograph across the table. Do you recognize this man? It was a grainy surveillance photo of someone I'd never seen before. No. Who is he? Viktor Kozlov, Russian national, runs import-export operations out of Miami. The Clearstone money? It wasn't just embezzlement. Falcon Ridge was laundering cash for the Russian mob. My stomach dropped. I didn't know. I had no idea it went that far. We know. Your evidence focused on the financial fraud. But it opened doors we've been trying to crack for years. Steinberg wasn't just stealing from his company, he was helping international criminals clean their money. Agent Reed leaned forward. Which means you've done more than expose corporate fraud. You've helped us unravel an international money laundering operation. Am I in danger? We don't believe so. Kozlov's crew is too busy trying to distance themselves from this mess. But we're putting a protective detail on you for the next few weeks, just to be safe. Over the following days, the investigation exploded into something beyond my wildest imagination. The FBI arrested 17 people. The DOJ announced they were pursuing RICO charges, treating Falcon Ridge's leadership like an organized crime syndicate. Assets were frozen in 5 countries. The media couldn't get enough of it. Every outlet wanted my story, but Michelle advised me to stay quiet. Let the mystery build, she said. When you're ready to tell your story, we'll do it right. Book deal, speaking engagements. This is your comeback. A week later, I was in a hotel room the FBI had arranged when my phone rang. It was my daughter, calling from college. Mom, I saw the news. Are you okay? I hadn't told her everything, trying to protect her from my mess. I'm fine, sweetheart. Better than fine, actually. My economics professor spent the entire class talking about your case. He called you the most important whistleblower since Enron. Mom, you're literally in my textbook. Well, they're updating it to include you. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. I'm glad something good came from this. Mom. I'm proud of you. I know things have been hard since the divorce and losing your job. But you fought back. You didn't let them win. After we hung up, I sat looking out at the Columbus skyline. Somewhere out there, Richard Steinberg was sitting in a federal holding cell, his assets frozen, his reputation destroyed, his freedom gone. The other executives were scrambling for plea deals, turning on each other like the rats they were. A notification popped up on my laptop. Someone had shared a video on LinkedIn, security footage from Falcon Ridge the day I was escorted out, but someone had edited it, adding text overlays. They thought they were destroying her. They handed her the evidence of their crimes. She lost a $75,000-a-year job. She exposed a $47 million fraud. They called her careless. The FBI called her a hero. The video had over 1 million views. The next morning, Michelle called with news. The SEC bounty determination came through. Based on the scope of the fraud and the international implications, you're getting the maximum, 30% of recovered funds. Amanda. They've already recovered $32 million with more coming. You're looking at a minimum of $9 million. $9 million. I'd been worried about making a $2,400 mortgage payment, and now I was getting $9 million. There's more, Michelle continued. 3 Fortune 500 companies want to offer you chief compliance officer positions. They want someone who isn't afraid to find the truth and act on it. The starting salaries are all over $300,000. I thought about the 14-floor desk between the printer room and the emergency stairs, the broken water cooler, the sad desk salads, Brad's smirk, Richard's contempt, the humiliation of being escorted out like a criminal. Amanda, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. Just thinking. About which offer to take. About how they gave me the one thing money can't buy. What's that? Proof that karma is real. That afternoon, I walked through downtown Columbus, no longer worried about being seen, no longer feeling like a failure. I stopped at a small cafe, the kind I couldn't afford just weeks ago, and ordered an overpriced latte. The news was playing on the TV above the counter. Richard Steinberg being denied bail. Falcon Ridge's stock hitting zero. Employees protesting, demanding their pension funds be protected from the company's collapse. The barista, a young woman with bright pink hair, recognized me. Oh my God, you're her. The woman who destroyed those assholes at the shareholders' meeting. I just told the truth, I said. Yeah, but the way you did it, during their big presentation, that was legendary. You gave hope to every employee who's ever been screwed over by their company. As I left with my coffee, I realized she was right. This wasn't just my victory. It was for everyone who'd been stepped on, discarded, silenced, everyone who'd been told they didn't matter. 6 months later, I sat in that same cafe, but everything had changed. The barista with pink hair, Jenna, I'd learned, always had my order ready. The usual, Ms. Doyle. The news was still playing on the TV, but today it was the verdict. Richard Steinberg, guilty on all counts. 25 years federal prison. The others got between 5 and 15 years each. Falcon Ridge's assets had been liquidated, with the proceeds going to defrauded investors and employees' pension funds. My phone buzzed with a text from Jacob in Seattle. Watching the verdict. We did it, Amanda. We actually did it. I'd taken the chief compliance officer position at Meridian Technologies, a company that wanted someone who'd never be afraid to speak truth to power. My first day, the CEO had introduced me to the board with one line. This is Amanda Doyle. She's the reason you'll never be able to cook the books on my watch. The SEC had deposited $11.3 million into my account last month. After taxes, it was still more money than I'd ever dreamed of. I'd paid off the mortgage on the house I'd almost lost, set up a trust fund for my daughter, and donated $1 million to a foundation supporting corporate whistleblowers. The rest sat in investments, generating more in monthly interest than I used to make in a year. But money wasn't the real victory. I pulled out my laptop and opened an email from a woman in Texas. She discovered her company was defrauding Medicare and, inspired by my story, had gathered evidence and gone to the authorities. You showed me it was possible to fight back, she wrote. You gave me courage. There were dozens of similar emails. Accountants, analysts, middle managers, people who'd found corruption and finally felt empowered to expose it. The Doyle effect, one newspaper had called it. The wave of corporate whistleblowers following my example. My phone rang. Michelle Hartley. Amanda, I have someone who wants to meet you. She's a producer at Netflix. They want to do a documentary about your story. I don't know. Michelle, it's not about the attention. It's about making sure this story reaches everyone who needs to hear it. Every employee who's being mistreated. Every person who's discovered something wrong but is too scared to speak up. She was right. This was bigger than my revenge against Falcon Ridge. It was about changing the culture that allowed people like Richard Steinberg to thrive while crushing anyone who got in their way. Set up the meeting, I said. As I packed up to leave, the news switched to a segment about corporate accountability. A professor was discussing how the Falcon Ridge scandal had led to new legislation protecting whistleblowers and increasing penalties for retaliation. They called it the Doyle Act. I walked out into the bright Ohio afternoon. My new office was 3 blocks away, corner suite, windows on 2 sides, a view of the river. The nameplate on my door read, Amanda Doyle, Chief Compliance Officer. But in my mind, it might as well have said, the woman who refused to be destroyed. On my desk was a printed email from Richard Steinberg's lawyer, sent 3 months ago, offering me $2 million to reconsider my testimony. I'd framed it as a reminder that they'd tried everything: intimidation, bribery, character assassination, and failed. I looked at my calendar. Tomorrow. I was speaking at Ohio State's business school. Next week. Testifying before Congress about corporate fraud prevention. Next month. The book tour started. The $100 Revenge. How they fired me over nothing and lost everything. But right now, in this moment, I stood at my window and watched the city below. Somewhere out there was another Amanda, sitting at a desk between the printer room and the emergency stairs, being overlooked and undervalued. Maybe she'd discovered something wrong. Maybe she was afraid to speak up. I hoped she'd hear my story. I hoped she'd know that the power they thought they had over us was an illusion. That sometimes, the people they destroy are exactly the ones they should have feared most. They'd fired me over $100 error, thinking I was nobody. Just another disposable employee who'd disappear quietly into poverty and shame. Instead, I'd become their worst nightmare. Someone with nothing to lose, everything to gain, and the evidence to burn their empire to the ground. As I settled into my chair and opened my laptop to begin my real work, making sure no company could ever do to someone else what Falcon Ridge had done to me, I allowed myself one last moment of satisfaction. Richard Steinberg would spend the next 25 years in federal prison, remembering the woman he'd tried to destroy over $100. He'd have plenty of time to calculate the real cost of that decision: his freedom, his fortune, his future. Karma, as it turned out, charged a hell of a lot more than $100 in interest. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Your own experiences and perspectives make these stories come alive. Until next time, remember, never underestimate the power of someone who has nothing left to lose.